This is out of everything we've done on this show. I know we'll get the most crap for this. Because we are going to separate fact from fiction and debunk some of the biggest Bruce Lee myths in honor of the latest film to have come out. So it's time for a Sacred Cow cook-off. All right. That says cook-out. Cook-off. Cook-off's a competition. At this point, though, they're really just competing with themselves. Okay. So I want to give credit where credit's due. On the outset, as far as what Bruce Lee was, there were some areas where Bruce Lee had some tremendous contributions to martial arts. Okay, we'll talk about that. Not amongst them being a great fighter, or being one of the strongest people pound for pound, or being one of the most prolific martial. None of it. None of that is true. And this is the thing. What really bothers me was when I was a kid and we went to my first, martial arts classes. They made us bow to Bruce Lee. What? Oh, yeah, this folklore.
Is he the deity now?
Yeah, they did. They made us bow to Bruce Lee. And I know it's just probably a crappy dojo. But here's the thing.
Pay to get your belt, kid?
This show is usually political, but truth does matter. And since this film has come out, people actually believe a lot of myths and folklore. Let me tell you what Bruce Lee actually was. Bruce Lee was really just a popular actor who respected martial arts, who was forward-thinking martial arts, but never actively fought, never actively competed, and was about 2 inches shorter and 10 pounds lighter than Notke Jared. You look startlingly like Bruce Lee.
It's the same build.
That's the thing. People are like, he's such a bad... He's smaller and lighter than Notke Jared, to give you an idea.
And look more like him than the guy getting paid a lot of money to play in the movie.
All right, so let's go to the first myth, because there's actually some truth to it. Myth 1, that Bruce Lee was the first to mix disciplines. He's therefore the father of mixed martial arts. Now, here's the truth. Bruce Lee, if you read the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, he was very forward-thinking in his time, and he did... discuss a lot of principles of mixing arts. He talked about keeping the good, leaving the bad, which he didn't practice it. He didn't train that way. He didn't really actively grapple. He would be less than a white belt. But he did talk about that philosophy, and since he was popular, it left more of its mark at a time when people were training in single disciplines. So I'll give him credit for that. He thought pretty progressively. And that's what Bruce would probably claim was his greatest contribution, but everyone else has to build up the folklore themselves. Here's the thing, though. He's not the first person to do it. If you go back to pankration, which is basically no holds barred, no rules, I think, other than no biting. It was one of the original Olympic sports early on in the Greek Olympics, basically combined boxing and wrestling. And speaking of boxing and wrestling, Tony Danza was a serious high-level wrestler and boxer. Yeah, he had cross-trained more than Bruce Lee and actively competed. Guys like... especially with that swollen tongue right now.
It's awesome, yeah.
Tony Danza.
Fantastic.
Jared biting his tongue, burning it with coffee, whatever it is our game.
We should have him do it all the time.
There was Baritsu, actually developed in 1898 by a British engineer. It was an attempt to combine boxing with jiu-jitsu. So there were a lot of attempts to do this. Now, I will say he brought it to the forefront in popular culture, but he wasn't the first person to do it. However, I give him credit for that. He was forward-thinking.
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody has to. You have to kind of adapt to what's around you, and I think it's just the first time that people saw it in the mainstream. They saw somebody doing a lot of different things.
Yeah, I don't think he was doing a lot of different things. He talked about it more in his book.
Well,
Biwata,
in the movies,
my friend.
In the movies, he was doing different things. Not an actual competition.
Here's the most important myth: that Bruce Lee is one of the best fighters of all time. Now, again, as someone who seeks truth, and I encourage you to, this is the most egregious lie. Bruce Lee has no track record of fighting. So for someone to claim someone is the best fighter, I mean, this is a guy who was way smaller than a UFC flyweight. That's 125 pounds. Smaller than Notke Jared, okay? The only actual fights of which we have any kind of proof, it comes down to witnesses who are often pupils of Bruce Lee. And there's a reason that it's the least reliable form of evidence in court, and we'll get to that. And they're remarkably inconsistent. So I don't have a problem with some people saying, like, listen, I bet you Bruce Lee, if he'd have ever actually fought, probably would have done better than people would. Okay, fine, but that's not the claim. They say he's one of the best fighters. It's just not true. So let's go through the fights that are considered iconic throughout Bruce's life leading up to the film. The one for which we have the most amount of proof is actually Lee versus Gary Elms. So this is written by martial arts action movies, and people have written about this in martial arts magazines. They write, Bruce proved his prowess many times in competition, becoming the Hong Kong boxing champion, knocking out all of his opponents, including British boxer Gary Elms. This is in print. Hong Kong boxing champion, world champion. Is there any proof? No, here's the truth. It was an amateur high school match, and there isn't even agreement over the fact that Bruce Lee knocked out Gary Elms. It'd be like me claiming I beat world champion, I don't know, Nicholas Gill in judo because we competed against each other in a regional yellow belt tournament when I was 16 years old. It doesn't mean anything. And there's no proof of it. There's no proof of the knockout. That's the one over which we have for which we have the most proof. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know how hard it is for a 110-pound person to knock anyone out, much less all of their opponents?
It is exceedingly difficult.
Really difficult.
Here's another one: Lee versus Ted Wong. This is one that really bothers me because in 2017, a video surfaced. They claimed of the only ever recorded real fight of Bruce Lee in which he effortlessly. It's a lot easier to do something effortlessly than to pronounce it.
It is.
Let's have Jared try.
Flooring his opponent. Now, here's the truth. The truth is, this footage has been around for a long time. It was an exhibition with one of Bruce Lee's pupils. And I think we have the footage here of some of the kind of dance.
The ease in which he did it.
Yeah.
And explaining while he was doing it.
It's easy when someone's willing.
It was mind-boggling for me.
And part of this footage, people go around. There have been like several analysis videos with millions and millions and millions of plays. This was in the made-for-TV movie I Am Bruce Lee in 2012. People still believe the nunchuck ping pong thing with Bruce Lee. It's not real. You can do a quick search, but this is the problem with folklore and a consistent lie that remains unchecked around the cult of personality. None of these things with Bruce Lee are true. Here's another one they write about. Lee versus, it was a guy named Yoichi Nakachi. I remember listening to this story from one of my early martial arts instructors. And the reason I got my ass kicked in grade school because of the stuff I learned at these classes after bowing to Bruce Lee. Be water, my friend, and you'll get your ass kicked.
My friend.
All right, so this is legendarily, he faced this Yakai guy, and he beat him down in 11 seconds. This is what's written about. Okay, truth is, there's no evidence about this, again, beyond Bruce's pupils. So Jess Glover talked about it, and if you read his account, his version of the events, he says, yeah, Kimura was there too. He saw what happened. Only Kimura then says, no, I wasn't. Here's the thing, though. They were both Bruce Lee fans. Oops. And the problem is that it was Taki, I think is how you pronounce it, Kimura. And he said he wasn't there, but that didn't stop him from giving a story about how I actually heard that Bruce Lee took Yakai into a racquetball court and punched him straight across the racquetball court. It's not at all consistent with the guy, Jess, who says that Kimura was there. There's a reason that it's considered the least valuable form of evidence in court. By the way, this is not under threat of perjury. This is people trying to sell martial arts books. And they can't even keep their story straight. All right. So that leads us to the legendary fight around which this film is built. So none of these fights have occurred. For you to make a claim someone is a great fighter, there needs to be some evidence. This is an exercise in claims that circulate. We haven't even gotten into some of the silliest ones, like he beat Joe Louis in sparring. So this is Lee versus Wong Jack Man.
That's a real name?
That's a real name. Jeez. This is what the film is about. This film is of this epic fight, the fight that turned Bruce Lee into an icon if you watch the preview. And of course, this is where they do triple punches and they jump and do quadruple kicks and they defy the laws of physics but use their left hand torso when they turn right. So this is one of those films that's based on this iconic fight because it's considered to have defined Bruce Lee. Okay. Here's the truth about that fight. Although most seem to agree that the fight took place and this Wong Jack guy lost, there's no consensus on any details. And first off, him beating one person would hardly establish him as the greatest fighter of all time. But if you look at the details, so according to Wong Jack and William Chen's account, the fight lasted 20 to 25 minutes. And that's what's used for this film, the basis of the epic battle.
It's a freaking long time.
Yeah, but that's not what happened. Because then if you go on to David Chen's account, it lasted no longer than 7 minutes.
That's reasonable.
Then if you go by Linda Lee's account, his wife who wrote the book, Bruce Lee, The Man Only I Knew, how convenient, she says it was 3 minutes. It was 3 minutes. She actually, it lasted no longer than, she says Lee pounced on him and pummeled him to the ground, and it lasted 3 minutes. Now, if you go by Bruce Lee's account in some interviews, he says, I raised my hand, forcing him to relent. So instead of saying pummeling, he raised his hands, which just so happened to be like in a lot of his films in dramatic fashion. Again, here's the thing. Maybe the fight happened, maybe it didn't. The Wong Jack guy actually wanted to challenge Bruce Lee to a very public fight after that. You can draw your own conclusions as to what this is indicative of behavior. But all of these fights, what's so convenient, especially when you consider that none of the accounts are consistent, is they all occurred first off with other 135-pound Chinese men. So for I will take all comers. Yeah, what about me? It's 180. Oh, no. That one over there.
In the back.
135-pound Chinese man. So they all happen to have conveniently.
Don't be him. I fight him tomorrow.
Yeah. There's open weight class. Tomorrow, you sign up. You fill out the form.
I swear this sounds like WWE.
Yeah, well, but people believe this.
Like marketing and, they're athletes, I get it, but...
So aside from them all being with other 135-pound Chinese men, they all conveniently occurred behind closed doors where there could be no witnesses.
It's going real good. I kicked so much ass.
You need any help in there?
No, I'm good.
You look so...
He's missed his calling.
You
He
look
really
very much like Bruce Lee. You could have played him in the biopic. So anyway, all right, let's move on. This brings us to myth number 3. And you'll see this right here, pound for pound, that Bruce Lee was, for some reason, one of the strongest men to ever lived. If you search on YouTube right now, you will see 10 reasons Bruce Lee could have been superhuman. No, he wasn't. He was not superhuman. Well, unless you're counting the strength he gained from being on drugs, according to the memoirs. Again, 10 pounds heavier than the actual Bruce Lee. He would have had to pull a Christian Bale machinist, diet down to be Bruce.
You had to cut weight to make Bruce Lee.
Yeah, especially toward the end of his life where he was going down to 120 pounds.
Jeez.
So, again, he was one of the strongest pound-for-pound people that lived. We add this up with the best fighter. There's no real evidence aside from witness testimony, which is remarkably inconsistent. Now, listen, Bruce Lee did some impressive parlor tricks, like the dragon flag is something that he did. He did, single-finger push-ups, which, by the way, is a lot easier when you're 120 pounds. It's not even hurt my finger. Yeah, we know. I was 120, I was in middle school. But the idea that he was one of the strongest men pound for pound. Okay, let's go to the evidence. It's laughable. The evidence we have, and Bruce Lee talked about weight training and advocated it. If you read his books, you read some of his writing. He squatted, he did 10 reps with 95 pounds. Ooh. If you actually look at his training schedule, which would put it very generously, would put his 1 rep max, if done properly, well below the 160-pound mark. Bruce Lee would absolutely be the strongest man at a girls' pajama party. Hey, if you like this clip, you're like most of the internet. You have a short attention span, but it was taken from the full show. You can see it in the box playing next to me. That's once a week on Thursdays, full 1.5-hour show, or you can join the Mug Club for the daily show. We have to take some of that off YouTube because they're monitoring us and censoring our words.